here. I can make this a little bit more interactive. And anyone is more than welcome to ask me questions. So thank you for having me here. I'm going to start. My name is Roger, and I'm product designer. So this is how I have prepared for this meeting today. So I want to say that I'll probably do 3 minutes as kind of quite quick introductions. And 5 minutes, I want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the things I did when I was in a startup and some of the things you do when you're first joining a startup. And sorry. And the other part is, and after that, I want to talk a little bit about the design sprint. So potentially it can be really helpful for the hackathon. And the last part is basically a reflection of joining the startup versus some of the other companies. I want to say, first of all, thank you for Sammy. I think he is the person who reached out to me and asked me to come here. For the people who is on the call, I'm curious, what's your background? And is your background in design or visual arts? Can I get some responses?
Mine is in actually finance and information systems.
Fascinating. What brings you to here? Do you have any specific questions?
I'm not pursuing a career in finance. I'm looking to be PM, and I've worked at a few early stage startups, and I do have a bit of a design background, so I'm just looking to learn more about it.
Got it. That's great. Anyone else? I saw Kat responded to say that he or she is coming from economics major. Is there anyone else?
Speaking from my background, I'm from CS. I think Sammy says that he's from CS as well.
Yeah, that's great. I'm curious, do any of you are interested in starting your own company or joining a startup before or after you graduating? Yes, okay. Yeah. I see some nod. Devin? Awesome, that's great. Any person interested in joining bigger tech companies like Facebook, Google? Maybe? Okay, never mind. Okay, and in this talk, feel free to interrupt me, and also if there's anything that you wanted to know more, we can talk a little bit as well. Okay, cool. So this is who I am. I joined Facebook in 2019, and that's before COVID. These are some of my teammates. Before COVID time, we like to do lots of A/B testing, including cupcakes. And I've been working from home since COVID, so everything is kind of on Zoom. My background is I grew up in Hangzhou, China, and I studied industrial design. And the first company I worked for is called Bosch. So I designed power tools, and as well as kind of drills. And at the time, my manager was Chicago native, and he was the person to recommend to say, hey, Roger, you should consider kind of going to United States for grad school to further your study. So I come to Providence, Rhode Island, and studied at Rhode Island School of Design for my grad school. And these are some of my classmates and some of the kind of discussion we have. And RISD stands for, also stands for reason I'm sleep deprived. So we work definitely pretty hard. And after that, I joined a design studio called Evolution Studio in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I also started teaching a class, and we do mostly micro devices and software design for healthcare. I also started teaching a class in MIT for drawings and industrial design. So most of my talk today is about my experience at a startup called Panorama Education. And this company was founded by 2 undergrads in Yale University. So we went through the Y Combinator in 2013. And I joined the team in 2015 as the first designer. I spent about 4 years in Panorama, and I saw kind of the company grow from 20-ish people to about 200 people, and see the company kind of going through the 10x growth as well. So the Panorama team's mission is about helping teachers use data to support each student's needs and help leaders build great schools. And the way we do that is, in the very beginning, we essentially just asking students lots of questions, and they will give us the data point. So we'll ask questions about how much have you learned from this teacher, and we'll ask questions about do you have friends at school? So these are mostly questions we ask for K-12 students, and we gather those data to provide a feedback loop for teachers as well as for principals as well. So that's the kind of the quick idea of the company. So getting started. So this is my desk, the startup. Just wanted to kind of pose a question here for the people who is listening. When you start in a company, you're likely the first designer in a startup. Where do you begin? What's the first few things you do? I'm just gonna let the question linger a bit. And so it's really hard in the beginning because it's likely nobody else can direct the work that you do. You have to be your own manager or be your own boss in that way. Some of the engineering team members and all the other team members may have never worked with a designer before. So it's really, really new. From my own experience, I noticed there are 3 things I find are really, really helpful. The first one is really know your team. So when I first joined the team, I did ask my team members at the time to say, hey, which part of the products do you need the design the most? And I simply just send out a survey. I say, hey, what do you think, which part of the products needs most design work? So getting those kind of feedbacks is really helpful. It helps me understand where to start. The second part is really about knowing your product. So this is our product when I first joined the company. We had a really robust data set and very good security, but the design of the product itself is very much like a CSV sheet. So it's not really a product. So this probably is the biggest challenge I had for design. And then it's also very difficult to navigate. The data was great, but it's really difficult to navigate. So the last thing you really wanted to do is really knowing your users. So in the 4 years I was at the company, I get to know my quote unquote users throughout times. So I sit in and conducted more than 100 educator interviews. So basically talking to teachers, talking to principals. I did more than 6 kind of school district visits. And also I taught a class at a Boston public school just to getting to know how my users day and day feel like. And it helps me kind of gain perspective of what the users will go through. So these are my students at Boston public schools. The other part that you can know your users is actually using web analytic tools. So this way you get to know your users through data, through quantitative data. And in here, you can see that you see different patterns of how users coming into the product. You can see in the Christmas, nobody comes into the product. And you can also see the differences types of users coming into the product. So the red line is mostly the principal, the school administrators, versus the blue lines are mostly teachers. And this helps you understand how often the people come into the product and their behaviors. There are 2 types of very different users. So for the teachers, they really kind of come into the product once in a while. For the principals, they come to the product a lot. So I always like to say that for the teachers, it's like going to the dentist when they come into the product, versus for a school administrator, it's like brushing your teeth. So those are some of the things you can really start doing when you're first joining a startup. Just to recap a bit, the first one is really know your team, know where the needs are, in terms of design. The second one is really know your product. And the last one is know your users. So at the time we have, over time, we built out 2 different products. And I wanted to talk to both of all of you a little bit about my experience building for a product for the teachers. And in this design, I will show you a little bit about kind of the hackathon process. So the overarching kind of question in terms of design is really, I want to know my teaching skills and how to improve. That's for the teachers. They wanted to know how is my teaching skills are doing and how to improve as a teacher. And this is a product, the teacher product in 2015. So before I joined the company, you can see that this is a product really needs a lot of love. It definitely has good data, but you can see kind of it's really, it doesn't show lots of context of what's going on. Versus for a teacher that she is interacting a lot with the students, it's really hard to understand 76% by kind of having these abstractions in terms of how the students responded to the survey. And I see that as an opportunity. I think that we have the data now, and definitely wanted to bring some of the context of the data to make our user feel connected to the real classroom. So that's the challenge, how to design data for trust and then improve. So this is kind of the design sprint process. It's great for kind of really align the team and talking to the users. So in the beginning of the design process, you really want to unpack the problem. So you may spend a lot of time really just homing in on the problem itself. And then the other thing you wanted to do is looking at some of the competitors' landscapes, learning from other products as well. You want to analyze the past user interviews, understand the user perspective, and then really map out how a user coming into the product with the work user flow look like. The other part you can do is really do kind of lots of sketches to generate lots of ideas. So this is called Crazy 8. Basically, giving yourself a very small amount of time and generate lots of ideas really fast. So these are some of the kind of design ideas that within a limited time you can generate. And these are some of the sketches we have done there. And afterwards, it really is trying to get the feedbacks from all your team members, as well as from your kind of sales team members or some of the other peoples as well. And we do lots of kind of silent voting to help you understand what are some of the ideas that are strongest. You also wanted to hear from the founders and just to understand their long-term views and understand the vision of the product as well. So this is our founder and CEO, Aaron, and talking through some of the design ideas there. So these are one of the ideas we landed on. Basically, we wanted to feel like this is a platform. We not just wanted to show the data, but we also want to show the context around the data as well. And we built a kind of wireframe to understand how a user can kind of onboarding to this view, and building out kind of basic ideas of what that would look like. And the next part is really to get some user interviews and user testing. So you wanted to bring some of the design, talk to real users, talk to educators to help you understand that you are on track in terms of how you're thinking about the product itself. And then you wanted to synthesize some of the user feedback. So this view here is essentially basically kind of a color code of some of the user feedbacks on what are some of the things that's great, what are some of the things that's not so great. And every single column is a user. And once you put them together on a spreadsheet, you started to see some of the patterns. Yeah, so when it comes to execute the vision, of course, it's never going to be like within a week. We get it to this vision probably through a few years. And as a designer, you wanted to kind of build out a design system first to able to have the set of typography and set of designs, patterns to execute your design vision. So this is the final results. And like I said, it's not building in a day, it's built out throughout years. So when user landed on this product, instead of the gray background that you saw earlier, they're really greeted by a school and district environment. So immediately for user, you feel like, oh, I know this is my school district. I feel connected. I see my students. I see my classrooms. So that's providing a context. And then when the user kind of landed in the product itself, you'll be able to see kind of how, who took the survey, the number of students who took the survey, to help you understand the context of those data. Once you dive into one of the topics, it really helps you understand how the results have changed over time. So having a historical background of how that data coming from also help you understand the timing and everything. And in addition to change over time, it also shows your benchmark compared to the rest of the country or rest of the school. So it shows you where you are in comparison to your peers. So in this view here, it's like 64% your score, but you're kind of like a little bit above the average. So it helps you understand the context of the data. And last but not least, it basically helps you see the breakdowns of the data. So these 5 questions make up the data. And you can see in this view here, the question number 3 is where I wanted to probably spend time improving on. And last but not least, I think you will be able to see some of the actions add-ons help you see how to improve. So this is really kind of the impact. You can see that from 2015 to 2019, how the products evolve over time. And once again, it takes a lot of effort and sweat to go through all that. And throughout the 4 years I was there, Panorama Education will be able to serve 9 million students, 8 states, 900 school districts across the country. So that was, I was really happy and how the growth of the company and the products are. But oftentimes we get some of the feedbacks through email, and this is one of probably my favorite. She said that this is my first year teaching in high school. It was great to see what the students feel about my skills as a teacher and how I can improve on different aspects of my teaching. So this is what the products is trying to address. I'm really happy to hear the users are getting kind of the needs and help from the product itself. Cool. So that's kind of where the overall kind of the design process are. You see a little bit about the design sprint as well as some of the other ones. So that's kind of the product side. Last, I want to talk a little bit about some of the reflections. I want to say that if you are interested in joining a startup or starting your own, I would say the pro and the benefit of that is it's really good at accelerated learning. Most of the time you're doing something really new. And so for example, as a product designer, I had to learn how to conduct user research, how to do user analytics, and even product management. And I learned them by actually doing the work. And because there are just no other people doing it. So you really have to learn on the job to execute. And in many times you're basically doing things you are not even qualified. Some people, depends on who you are. I personally find that's really helpful to learn lots of different skill set. So in this photo here, I was actually conducting a training for all the school principals in one of the school districts in Utah. And like learning on the job, I have to learn how to kind of train other people to use the products and use software. The second part, I think, is a really great benefit. If you coming from computer science background or some of the other background, if you really wanted to know how to build a company, how to build a business, this is great. Regardless of your roles, you'll be exposed to how the business is doing. One is really your job is dependent on it, and because most of the startup is trying to escape from the failure. So if your business is not doing well, you're probably not going to have a job next year. And the second part is that because it's such a small company, you're going to probably sit next to a person who is a salesperson or a marketing person. They're going to go on to a sales call and they're going to come back to your desk and they will tell you what happened and why the client didn't like the product or didn't buy the product. So those are also really helpful for you to grow like a business mindset and understand how to grow a company. The photo I put here is basically how we expanded throughout the United States. where we kind of landed on in terms of the number of clients we have. The last one I would say really helpful as joining a startup is you probably will build some really lifelong friendships. Many of the people you got to work with is very much like your college, that they are passionate about the mission or the company itself or the product itself, and all of you spend lots of time together. They will be your friends and they can really help expand your worldviews. So I think that's a great benefit. And I will tell you a few things. Oh, this is my PM, and she is pregnant at the time. And you also get to have some opportunity to mentor other people or manage other people. So this is my intern at the time, and I was helping her kind of going through a project as a design project. So I think those are great learning opportunities for you if you wanted to join a startup. I would say some of the things that probably you're not going to get in a startup is if you really look for work-life balance, that's probably not the right place. You're likely putting probably 60+ hours to do the work, and sometimes it can really burn you out. Depends on where you are in terms of life stages. I would say it's more like a lifestyle choices rather than a professional choice. So that's the first one. The second one is I want to be honest here. You're less likely to get a top-tier salary working in a startup. Some of the startup can pay top tier now, but I would say many of the equity that you're getting are very much locked away because the company is private. So if you're really looking for the biggest financial gain, startup probably is not the right place for you. So that's the other side of startup. And the last part is if you're looking for just really trying to be great at, let's say, engineer or design, it may not necessarily be the best way for you because it's possible you will have a manager who is not very experienced as well. You really have to be a self-learner. You have to reach out to look for mentorship and by yourself. So that can be a little bit challenging because you also have lots of work on your hand you have to do. So that's another reason that you may not want to consider a career in startup. So that's the three kind of pros and cons, I would say, working as a startup. And that's pretty much is it. And I would say that feel free to find me on LinkedIn. And also I have a Medium account to talk a little bit about my experience as a designer. That's everything of my talk. I'm going to pause here, open up to the floors and for Q&As. If you have any questions, anything that you wanted me to dive in a little bit more, to say a little bit more.
Awesome, thank you. If anyone has any questions, feel free to leave it in the chat or just go ahead and unmute yourself and then you can just go ahead and speak. Anyone have any questions? Looks like Sammy has a question.
Yeah, Sammy was asking, do you ever see yourself working at a startup again in the future? Yeah, definitely. I would say for sure. But if that's the future, I'll probably not be an employee. I would likely be just starting my own company. That's more likely. Yeah, and I think part of working at a startup, seeing how the company grow, is gaining that experience to understand what it takes to actually managing a company and running a company as well.
And then I think Kat asks, I'm new to hackathons. What methods do you recommend for user research in a short amount of time?
Yeah, totally. I would say probably the best one is usertesting.com. So if let's say you wanted to be able to design a project for a specific type of users, usertesting.com can give you a very good, very quick kind of feedbacks in terms of how the design is working. You can upload a few images and just asking people to comment, and probably within 24 hours, you get a few responses to know if your design is working. The other part, in terms of user research, I would recommend that if you know the target audience you wanted to design for, let's say it's educators, teachers, or nurses, and I would say do your best to reach out to your own networks and kind of reach out to them and be able to say, hey, I'm doing this hackathon, and in, let's say, 24 hours, I wanted to show you some of our work. Can you give us some feedbacks? And when you are students running a hackathon, it's probably the best best starting point to ask for help and feedback. And most people are really generous with their time to give feedbacks to you. No problem. Any other questions?
This isn't a design question, but I'd love to hear more about how you thought scaling culture at the startup you worked at as you went from a few employees to hundreds of employees.
Yeah, totally. It's probably one of the most challenging things in terms of scaling culture. I would definitely say that I think the culture kind of changed over time, and it was mostly made up of the people who is working there. In the beginning, it was easy. In the beginning, it was easy because it's only a very small number of people that we sit together and we have lunch together. So the culture is very much how it was formed. But once you go beyond, let's say, 50 people, it can be a little bit harder to maintain that culture. There are some of the events that really can help define the company culture. For example, in Panorama, we also do hackathons, and this is a great way to kind of build a culture for innovating. The other thing we did in the company is we encourage every single employees to go on a field trip with a sales team member. So this way, regardless if you're engineers or designers, you actually go to the school district, talking to the users. And this way you really build up the empathy for your users. And I would say that's pretty rare in terms of for companies. So those are kind of great ways of kind of scaling up your culture and preserve the mission of the company. Right now I'm working at Facebook. I would say the culture is very much there as well. I think that the company really definitely moved really fast, and it really empowering people to be the captain of their own. So those are also great things. But I don't know how they preserve it, but I would say that it was a really good culture. That's a great question. That's probably the most difficult thing to do in a startup, to get the culture right.
Any other last minute questions? Feel free to leave it in the chat. But otherwise, it looks like that's it.
Yeah.
In which case, again, thank you so much, Roger, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and everything to come speak with us and share your experience and everything.
No problem.
Yeah. So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you, Sammy, for inviting me. And the best of luck in your internship.
Yep. Awesome.
All right. See you.
See you. And for everyone else, we will have our next series of speaker talks and everything in about 30 minutes. So feel free to drop on by then.